It's story time with Kira. If you're new here and you like ghost stories and visual ASMR triggers, I would suggest that you just hit that subscribe button because I've got a lot more coming your way. Today we're going to be talking about the Smell family, and as I talk to you about it and tell you the story, it's really creepy. Oh my gosh, it's so creepy. I can't even, it's okay. We'll get into it and you'll see. And I'm also sipping on my tea, so yeah. Anyhow, it's a cozy day here. I hope it is where you are. Just feel free to sit back, relax, listen to the story. You'll get tingles upon tingles. It's so creepy. Okay, let's begin. So, Janet and Jack Smell, they had 4 young daughters, and Jack's parents, their home was flooded, so they lost their original home, and they ended up moving into a duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Jack's parents were in one, and Jack and Janet and their young daughters were in the other. It was not the best situation, like really old duplex, needed a lot of help, that kind of thing. And obviously, Janet and Jack weren't in the best place in their lives. Like, they weren't, they just lost their home in a flood, so they were quite stressed, hoping for a new start, that kind of thing. Okay, so they started fixing up the house, and immediately there were lots of strange things that happened, but explainable things, like electricity going out, lights turning off and on, and tools like hammers and stuff like that going missing while they were working. They were trying to repaint and repair and all that. And there was some really weird stuff like wall stains on the walls that were they'd put on a fresh coat of paint, and the next day they'd wake up and there was just nasty black type stuff that seeped through the walls at night. Sometimes kitchen appliances would catch on fire, even though they were unplugged. And there was just really nasty smells that would come very quickly, completely overwhelm the house, and then just as quickly would completely disappear. So as these things went on, they began to realize that it wasn't just normal, house settling or normal type stuff. But they still, obviously, they'd just lost one home, so they weren't about to move and, they weren't in a financial position to do anything as far as move homes, and there was nothing truly sinister happening at that time. So they stayed. Now, actually, otherwise, things were going really well for the family. Jack was promoted at his job. His salary was twice as much as it used to be. Janet was pregnant, and she was really involved in the community. This was late 1970s, so did I say that before? I don't know. I meant to if I didn't. Late 1970s is when this all happens, and it's based in Pennsylvania. Okay. So, she was organizing, I think 1970s is when all the Mothers Against Drunk Driving stuff was happening, so she was really involved in that in the high school. Their girls were doing really well, and Jack's parents were doing well, so it was all fine, except for the few niggling little things happening in the home. So, yeah. So anyway, after a few months, the strange things happening began to intensify. So, Janet would think that she heard Jack's mum from the other duplex calling her, and Jack's mum would think that she heard Janet calling her. And then sometimes Jack's mum would say, "Why were you guys fighting?" You were, she would hear really, bad fighting screaming at each other in the living room, you know. So, and Janet would be like, what are you talking about? We never fought. That wasn't us. So things like that, it began to escalate. Jack's mother had a heart attack. And they began to see like these really creepy black misty masses that would just like float through the home. And even the dog started to, there was some really, the dog started to be, they had like this German Shepherd, Janet and Jack did, and like he was beginning, like if the black mass came in, he would go on high alert, you know, and growl, and he was obviously like seeing something. It was very creepy. And then this was mostly happening while Jack was away. Janet was mostly experiencing, her and her daughters were experiencing this, and Jack was like, he didn't see as much of it. But one night, Jack was in bed asleep, and he heard someone whispering, like, it sounded like a young woman. And then so he turned over to look at his wife, and he saw a shadowy figure, like, rubbing up her leg, like, touching her. Oh my gosh, it's so creepy. So after that, that was like a milestone in their story. Like, everything got much worse after that. The daughters were terrified because they were experiencing things too. Like, one of the girls, when she was in the shower, she would see something like in the mirror, and then it would just be gone. There was one time they had like an old light fixture. Hang on, I need a sip of tea. And the light fixture fell from the ceiling, and it cut one of the daughters like really bad. Poor girl. At one point, when one of the black masses was floating and Janet was home alone, the family dog, that German Shepherd, like not a small dog, she saw him like picked up and thrown against the wall. Like, it really hurt him. So everything was getting much more violent, much worse. One time Janet said that she was lifted. She couldn't see anything, but she was lifted in the air and then tossed across the room just like the dog. Jack, that same young woman that he heard whispering, came into his room at night and molested him. And then sometimes when the whole family was away, the neighbors would say they heard screams, like horrific screams in the house, like coming from the windows, expletives, and just like somebody was being tortured inside while no one was home. So, okay, so they were, obviously the whole family was just terrified. So they contacted these demonologists who were becoming famous at the time because of the Amityville horror case. It was the Warrens, maybe you've heard of them, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They've written some really fantastic books about this story as well, if you want to check them out on Amazon, Audible, all those. So Lorraine Warren was clairvoyant, and they were kind of used to this thing, so they came to the house, checked everything out, and Lorraine said that in the home there were 4 spirits: an old woman, a young and possibly violent girl, a man who had suffered and died in the home, and then the most horrific of all was a demon that used these spirits to destroy the Small family. So the Warrens were like, okay, ghosts are great, but demons are bad. That's the one that's like really driving everything to hurt you guys. So they did a lot of prayer sessions, exorcisms, but the attacks continued and everything seemed to be getting worse and worse. Like, it was just a constant occurrence. And so eventually, out of desperation, the Smells took their story public in hopes that someone might hear of like what's going on and have some kind of solution. They weren't, I can't remember why, but things were financially not well with them again, so they weren't able to like move out or get a new house, that kind of thing. They felt quite stuck. Well, so what ended up happening was the press like latched onto this because it was really close outside without cameras flashing and people getting in their faces. And in the meantime, everything was still just horrible inside. Like, they'd come in, the furniture was moved around. Jack woke up to somebody, like, scratching his feet, like, violently trying to torment him. It was just awful. So they contacted the Roman Catholic Church in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and multiple priests came out to bless their home, but they never heard anything or saw anything. But in 1986, there was one priest that took it seriously enough, like, to move into the home, like, hoping he could see something firsthand. And he only stayed 2 nights, and then he left. So that same year, though, the smells were like, they were desperate to have it in, especially because one of the, I guess the demon itself, they thought was molesting them and the girls. Like, so anyway, so they were like, we just can't do this anymore, we can't do it. So they finally packed up and left their home. Now there is some debate, a lot of debate about how true this was or not. Like, some people thought that they were trying to ride the wave of media curiosity and sensationalism from the Amityville Horror House, like they were trying to cash in on that, and they did end up selling the rights of their story to filmmakers and stuff. But at the time, I think Jack and Janet, from what I read, they just wanted to be done with it. So they sold their story, moved on, didn't talk about it anymore, that kind of thing. I don't know. I definitely believe in ghosts and paranormal activity, that kind of thing, personally. And their story sounds very consistent with other stories, other witness reports. But of course, if they knew of the other stories themselves, they could have just copied those. So it's really tricky. I also think because there's so many reports from others, like neighbors who were outside their home, when they knew the smells weren't home, and they heard cursing and screaming and craziness from the house, and the lights were all off and nobody was home. Like, you've got outsiders that had nothing to gain by lying, who said they heard those things. So I don't know. I tend to believe them. And also I think moving away was moving when you have a large family, it's a really big deal, so I don't think they would have, it almost seems like they fled, like they were just done and left. If they really wanted the publicity, you would have thought they would have stayed and tried to, really get as much of that as they could out of it. So I don't know, it's very creepy, the idea of some force unseen being able to pick you up and throw you across the room, of seeing something hurting your children. So I have a lot of sympathy, I suppose, a lot of compassion. I certainly wouldn't want to find myself in that situation, no matter how much fame or money it brought. So anyhow, let me know what you think in the comments. And come back and see me again. I'm